Hello, and welcome to another episode of Search Off the Record, a podcast coming to you from the Google search team discussing all things search and having some fun along the way. My name is typically Gary, and I'm joined today by Lizzie Sessman from the search relations team, of which I'm also part of. Lizzie.
What?
Let's make this awkward, shall we?
Like this?
Yes,
like
thank you.
I can just keep...
This was perfect. No, it was fantastic.
Interrupting you.
You're really good at this.
Yeah, I knew it. Yes.
Okay, you can stop now.
Okay.
Thank you for the contribution. Continuing with our In the Spotlight series, in which we present folks from the larger search marketing community who inspire us, today we have Jennifer Slegg. Hi, Jen.
Hello.
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 Thank you, Lizzie.
Is this thing on?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good.
I think I've known Jen for probably like 274 years now, or what it feels like.
It feels like that, yes.
It's like no time at all in the grand scheme of things. How old are you?
17.
17. Oh, how long have you been 17?
A while.
Okay, so the year was 1872, and you met Jennifer here. Jennifer, how did this go down?
We actually met for the first time at a conference, I think maybe in SMX, like many, many, many years ago. And just kind of hit it off from there.
I don't remember which conference was it. I'm speculating that it was either SMX Advanced in Seattle, or it was the New York one. But I don't actually remember the exact one. And I also don't remember whether it was me on stage and then after that we just chatted about something, or it was more like email or something.
I remember chatting with you, I think in the speakers room maybe, because generally I'm not one of the let's swarm the Google speakers after a speech kind of person.
I miss those times.
I know that's your favorite part.
Yes. Especially after COVID. That's a fantastic experience. But anyway, we met and then we were chatting about all search stuff because that's what we do, and we were geeking out about search. And I think I remember that at one point we discovered that we are both playing this weird game called Ingress, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
What is that? This is like the second or third time I've heard this. I don't know what it is. Is it still, is it a niche thing, or?
I think it's very niche.
It's very niche. Okay, and you're still playing it?
Off and on.
Off and on,
It's kind of like a predecessor to Pokemon Go, which people are probably more familiar with.
And you're also playing that, right?
Yes.
When Pokemon Go came around, did you stop playing Ingress, or are you keeping both open?
I played both for a while, but then they released a new Ingress, and I didn't enjoy it as much, so I kind of focused a bit more on Pokemon.
Mm.
Yeah, that was probably the mood killer for me as well. The new Ingress Prime, that was too much change. But it's a walking game, so you walk around like a headless chicken, and then you try to kind of like geocaching.
Okay.
And then you find places, and then you interact with places, and it can be an AR experience. Well, it is an AR experience. So it's really good for walking.
I see. So they incentivize you with something like...
And I remember that when we went with Jen to the same conference, then sometimes we spent time like ingressing around, which meant that sometimes we walked like probably 20, 25, 30 kilometers, which is...
Yes, in a day.
That's too much. I don't know.
It was crazy.
For American listeners, that's about 750 football fields. What do you say we talk about search a little bit? Because, search off the record, not ingress off the record. So for those who don't care too much about quality raters guidelines and EAT, who might have read your publications, want to say a few words about who are you and what are you doing and why are you doing and why are you?
It's like so many questions.
I'm pretty much just a girl who does a lot of writing in the search industry. My background is in journalism, so I was actually published in newspapers a long time ago before, everything was online, believe it or not.
Wait, newspapers?
I know, right? Like when I actually had to go down to the newspaper and submit my article on a floppy disk.
What?
Wow. Okay. And then you were writing about what?
Back then I was writing about history, so different historical things that happened where I live.
Oh, did you specialize in a particular time period?
Not really a particular time period, but more like interesting historical events or buildings or places in my hometown. So we had a few different newspapers here, and I wrote for each of them at some point.
Did you have like your own column kind of a thing so that you could establish like a piece?
No, but they typically would have, especially on like Sundays, they'd have like more of a artsy kind of a section of the newspaper, and so they would publish historical pieces and stuff. So that's where I got my start for being published.
And then you went from history to search?
I know, right?
How?
So what actually happened was, so I was doing writing and it came up that there was Learn HTML. So I'm like, internet was like brand new then. And so I went to take this class to learn how to do HTML. And it was back when everything was hand-coded. So Dreamweaver didn't exist, Front Page didn't exist. I learned how to code.
Oh my God. Like, toom.
I learned how to hand code in Notepad. I don't even think TextPad existed then. So I learned how to code by hand. And that's how I designed my first website. And I remember how excited I was when this program Hotdog came out, where it was like you could hit a button and it would do like your HR and like it would automatically input your tags for you. That was all it did. It was just basically a shortcut for different HTML code tags. But oh my God, I remember just being so excited and thinking it was like the best thing ever. And then eventually I got Dreamweaver, and then, that was a whole different ball game. I was like, this is amazing.
And also it was the devil, basically, because it was doing so much weird stuff with the HTML that...
Wasn't as bad as Front Page, though. I tried Front Page for a little bit, and that was atrocious.
Jen, we don't talk about Front Page here, okay? It's one of those topics that we cannot talk about. It's the forbidden topic. How did you end up talking about QRG, like the Quality Raters Guidelines and EAT? Because so far you have HTML. I assume that you had a website because HTML,
Yeah, and so I just started to get more interested in like how to make it rank, and dabbled a little bit in pay-per-click back when Overture had penny clicks, which was like the exciting thing. Trip down memory lane, right?
Yes.
And then eventually when Google became a thing, I started learning more about Google, and it literally snowballed from there. And when I got into the interest of like really how to make good content for SEO, obviously eventually QR Quality Rater Guidelines kind of fell into that aspect as well.
Do you remember like when they were like published, the document for the Quality Rater Guidelines? I'm assuming it was not when Google was founded. There's probably some...
It must have been about 2010, I think. Maybe somewhere around there.
I think it's even more recent, because I remember that Paul Haar, one of our leads, was very excited about it. I think previously it was somehow leaked or something like that.
Yeah.
And then people picked it up, and then Paul Haar, decided that why don't we just like publish it, because it doesn't actually have anything that we need to keep secret. So let's just publish it, and then there's no risk of leaking.
Oh. Yeah. I remember I wrote about them, like all the updates for probably 2 or 3 years before, like all the leaked versions.
Right.
That someone would leak eventually, or I'd get a copy and be like, don't tell anyone I gave this to you.
What?
Kind of thing from like SEOs who had their like kids doing Quality Rater Guideline things. And then eventually once they released it publicly, it was amazing, because then we all had access to it's kind of like the blueprint of what Google wants to see for, the highly rated websites, as well as what they don't want to see, which I find just as fascinating.
Yeah. Have you ever written about EAT, like specifically?
Not specifically. I've given a lot of talks about EAT, but only in terms of like
Ooh.
how it's impacted in the whatever changes were made.
Do you think we should keep it a secret what EAT means, or we should tell listeners
Or
who
me.
don't know?
Yeah, what if I don't know? It means eating, right? Like we're talking about food?
Sure.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, it's an acronym, right? If people are spelling it out, it stands for something, right? EAT?
Expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. It's always a big mouthful to say that, so we all just call it EAT.
What's the other one? YAML?
Oh, how do people say that verbally? Because I've literally never said it.
YAML.
I call it YMYL, your money, your life.
Oh,
which
yeah,
is
YMYL.
YMYL. Okay, not YAML. That's a different thing.
It's also so interesting because internally you rarely ever hear these things.
And then you go to a conference and that's all
Like
people talk
everyone
about.
is talking about, yeah. And we do have those terms in the QRG, in the Quality Raters Guides or Guidelines, but I don't know, internally you just don't hear them for some reason. Anyway, it's kind of interesting.
You have access to the more exciting things though that
Do
we
we?
don't. So
Um,
just a bit.
I don't want to talk about it. Okay. So, you mentioned floppy disk.
Yes.
I'm jumping back and forth on the timeline. So now we are back in 1872. You mentioned floppy disk, which means that you had a computer.
Yes.
Do you remember which computer you had? Like what kind of computer it was?
Well, it had 4 megabytes of RAM, and I still had to dial up.
You were rich.
And I remember when I got my laptop and it had 8 megabytes of RAM, I was like so excited.
Rolling. So, like the floppy disk to the website, was that the motivation to learn HTML so that you didn't have to hand carry the floppy disk, or what brought you?
My newspaper didn't even have an online presence at the time.
Okay, so they wouldn't
Nothing.
even be able
So-
to like receive anything. It's like mail
No,
me a
it
letter.
was
like
It was like Word document, here you go. And yeah, like when I started learning HTML, we were still using Netscape, I think. I'm pretty sure Internet Explorer didn't exist yet.
Jeez.
So it was like purely personal project, like not something that then could better the newspaper relationship. Just like
No.
you're interested in learning HTML.
Yeah, just personal. It was, it's a topic I was interested in at the time. Then I was also helping out a family business. And
Oh.
so it just kind of went from there.
Was that your first website, or did you build something for the class?
I can't remember if we built something for the class, but a little bit later, I took a class at university. So I was working on a history degree, but I took a minor in professional writing. And there was a class on learning HTML.
Whoa.
And I'm like, well, I already know how to do this. I'm going to take this and get the easy A+, which I did. But one of those things was creating a website. And so that is actually how I really got interested in SEO, was because it was that website that I worked on just on a hobby topic at the time that made me kind of start getting interested in how to, promote it better online.
Do you remember what the hobby topic was?
I do, but I'd rather not say.
Oh, no.
It actually still exists out there in some form.
Secret.
Makes a little bit of money.
Oh, okay.
Now I have to find it.
I know.
Oh no.
The intrigue.
What have you done? I know what this evening will be like.
I'm sure it has, like, I haven't really touched it for a long time, so I'm sure it has horrible SEO techniques on it that people would be like, oh my god, but it just kind of exists right now.
Oh, where is it? Tell me. Tell me.
Maybe one day I'll go and refresh it, but it's not really been high up on my
Tell
radar
me.
when I have other sites.
I need to know. I got to know. You mentioned that you were already thinking a little bit about SEO, but you just got on the internet with your website, and we don't know what kind of search engine were you optimizing for.
Oh, was it Yahoo back then? Well, when I originally started, I think it was like web crawler, maybe? Like one of the original. I know, I'm blowing your
Wow.
mind. aren't I?
It was like 92, 93.
Yeah. I remember voting on like their icon they were going to use when they were going to
Yeah.
change their logo.
Was there much written on the web about how to do this? Like, how did you come about, like, oh, this is even a thing to do, and then you were going to write about it?
It was just kind of like an up and coming kind of thing, and you you'd search the web and, really slow results, obviously, because everyone's up on dial-up. And then, you'd land on a web page where they'd have the MIDI playing in the background, of course, which was the big thing, with their counter of how many hits they had. And so it just kind of like, well, I'd like to learn how to do this, but obviously there were just no builders back then. So it was, you literally had to learn how to do it yourself then.
Yeah, the internet was so much more different than today it is, because it was kind of like, I don't know, like Wild West. Like you had really weird websites, and then in contrast you had really like popular big websites that were trying to do something nicer, but then you also had those weird sites like the $1 advertising space, like the guy that was selling 1 pixel.
The Pixel? Oh, that was much later. That must have been only 10 years ago, maybe.
Really?
I think it was more recent than that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Blurring the timelines, I know.
Fine. But yeah, the internet was much weirder than nowadays. It was also really weird that you couldn't really find the information. Like, even if search engines were doing a better job, the information was just not on the internet. Like nowadays we have Wikipedia, and basically you can find literally anything about pretty much anything. Back then it was kind of empty.
If you got 1 or 2 results, it was kind of like a big deal, because there was just a lot of searches that just returned nothing, just because there was such a limited number of people that were capable of making websites back then.
Yeah. Was there any like data available about like what people were searching for, like even at that time? Like you're just kind of flying blind, like.
No, I don't think so. Like I remember that with Alta Vista we were trying to guess what other people were searching for based on what Alta Vista was returning to us when it was not matching our queries. Like, for example, you searched for funny cat or whatever, and then the first 2 results on the top were about funny cats, but then below that you could see just cat something, like feeding cats or funny trees or whatever. So the information retrieval part of those search engines was very different, but it was helpful to understand what kind of content people are creating on the internet.
Yeah, you had kind of like a small, because there was just not many people creating websites, you kind of had really random topics. And back then, like, web rings was a thing. So, like, you'd click on the web rings, and you actually could find some really interesting, niche topics back then, just because there wasn't a lot out there.
What is a web ring? Sorry.
It was basically this thing that people would put on the footer of a website, and you'd have a bunch of people that would all join it, and you'd click it, and it would take you to, like, the next random website.
Oh, like shuffle. Just play me next song that's random.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. And some of them would just not even be related whatsoever. Others would be loosely based on a theme, like sports or history, but pretty generic still.
It's also kind of interesting that there were, or it feels like, and maybe this is my memory fooling me, but it felt like there were much fewer commercial websites or sites that were trying to make money out of their content or off of their content. Basically, you just went to a website, like a recipe website, and you didn't read about Adam and Eve and how the apple became the pie. But it just got to the point, like, you need 2 apples, and this is the recipe, the rest of the recipe. And there were no ads, no nothing. It was just the content itself. And that was kind of nice.
Yeah, there wasn't the mentality of where people are like, oh, I'm going to make this website to make money. It was like, I want to make this website because I really want to share this information with people.
Yeah, it was nice.
And then the downfall of the internet. No.
And then Google launched in 96.
and then AdSense launched, and that was kind of like the big game changer for people being able to.
I think AdWords launched in 2001.
Around there, yeah. I think AdSense was 2003 or 4, maybe.
Yeah, and then people started making money, and then, oh boy.
Then everyone became an expert on, like, mesothelioma.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. How can you even pronounce that?
I have to say, I did not know it was a thing until people were like, this is the most expensive keyword on AdWords.
What's the deal behind that? Like, why?
it was lawyers were willing to pay a lot of money to have their ads show up for mesothelioma.
Interesting.
Yeah, back in the days when I was doing things differently, as in I was spamming the internet, then I had an affiliate network off of which I was making some money, and I wanted to target this Mesopotamia or whatever, thing. And it was like, you actually have to pay the affiliate. No, you actually had to pay to become the affiliate of the network or something like that. It was a very, very specialized affiliate network. And apparently the commissions were like mind-blowing, but it was big money to get in. And the same was for AdWords as well. Like if you wanted to advertise content that was targeting this Mesopotamia or whatever, then you had to pay very, very big money to get, like, basic, like it was like I'm making stuff up, but it was like $100 per click or something like that to even show up for that. Yeah. And then the internet evolves.
Jen starts writing. Like, she starts writing about search. She stops doing just HTML hobby website to then you are publishing on your own site about search.
Yeah. It's, again, it was just kind of like writing about what I was interested in. That's part of why one of the things I'm probably best known for, other than the quality rater guidelines, is I wrote a big thing about Panda.
Panda algo. Not Panda.
And that's like one piece that got a lot of good feedback, because I actually was able to get a lot of quotes from Google about things related to Panda that hadn't really been confirmed before. And it's, I don't know, that's like one piece I'm really proud of. I like teaching people like how to create good content, like, and not create kind of like crappy content, and why it's so important to like write for your audience and not write for Google per se. So I think that article kind of did a really good job of kind of trying to like show people how important it is to write for your audience and not keywords and search engines.
But it's not easy to write about these topics. Like, you wrote about the QRG, you wrote about penguin, panda, whatever. They are all quite abstract. Like when we are talking about these externally, we are abstracting quite a lot. And yet the articles that you published or posts that you published, they are very understandable and very relatable for website owners. And that's one thing that I don't understand. Like, how did you digest what we said, what we abstracted into those long-winded posts that actually explain the thing really well?
So I really try to not just be like, this is what Google says and this is what changed, but I also like to go into like, okay, this is what changed, but this is why it's important for readers and SEO writers and the industry to know, like, how it's all good, and I'll find Danny to be like, oh, you need EAT, but I try to go more and show like, okay, why this is important, how you can do it, rather than just do it. So I guess I try to be more to explain it more, I guess, and break it down rather than just say, do this, that a lot of other people tend to do. But that also makes it a lot long-winded, as you were saying.
It's like super detailed, super thorough, and there's this like element of analysis that is generally missing from other posts that are just like straight up reporting like, this is what happened. But yours has like the take, like your particular take on what each thing means, which feels unique.
Yeah, that's what I really try hard to do, and I think I usually nail it.
Do you think we could create an AI gen and then just generate those posts?
I mean, well, I think that the whole idea of AI is kind of fascinating. Like, I've seen some of the stuff that AI can put out, and it still kind of reads a little bit stilted. Like, you read it and you're kind of like, something's like not quite right, or it's missing. But then I've seen some AI content where they use tools or whatever to make the AI content, but then if they have like a really skilled copywriter go and kind of like touch it up and, you know, grammatically phrase things how you'd want to be reading it if you're a reader, then I've seen some good stuff done that way. but I think the mass, churn and burn kind of
Yeah.
approach to AI, like spit out 1,000 articles by this AI generator and just publish them all. That's not really the way to go. But I mean, there are some benefits I can see where people are taking that content, but then kind of reworking it that can work, I guess.
Would you ever consider using like a tool to help with anything?
I don't know. I've not played around with it enough to be confident in what it's producing, at least at this point. I just prefer to write it myself and then plug it into like Grammarly and make sure my grammar is as perfect as I think it is, because sometimes I spell things wrong.
Yeah, I never do that.
You never do that?
My favorite typo ever was I accidentally published rage rank instead of page rank.
Nice. You could just sell it. It's intentional. It's like lean into
Everyone's
it.
like, that's a Freudian slip. And I'm like, yeah.
Nice.
So like your writing process with this, is it like, do you approach it in sections or like do a full like stream of consciousness draft? Like it's very research approach too. Like you're like systematically going through the changes that happened and then there's the big analysis at the end. Could you talk us through like the writing process?
Yeah, so often what I do is like I know my points I want to cover, but often I'll be like writing a section and then I'll be like, oh, I need to write about this as well. And I'll go and I'll, put a little headline or something or subsection headline later on to know that I'm going to be doing it. So then I go back and write some more and then, oh, I can't forget to write about this and, the same thing. And eventually I'll write it all. Then usually what I do that a lot of people don't do is I'll print out a copy and go over it again. And it helps me kind of visually see like, oh, this section should move here and that section should move there, that you don't necessarily notice when you're kind of like scrolling down a page as you're writing. So I'll do that as well. Yeah, then I'll do my edits and make sure that, I have no rage ranks in there and
or that you do have them, inject them.
And I often then will just like set it aside for, a couple hours or overnight and then come back to it. And then I'll be like, oh, I forgot I need to add this part. Or, oh, I should expand on this section a little bit more because I think people would, be interested to know a little bit more about the thought process or why this is important or, that kind of thing.
How long do you spend in kind of the thought process before you start writing? Like the new quality raters guidelines comes out, you read it and you're like percolating on the magic.
So usually when it's like the search quality rater guidelines, I'll print out copies actually.
Okay.
Because I've seen some people use like a tool to kind of show the differences and for some reason it doesn't read the quality rater guidelines very well. So I actually go through and I'll have like copies, each copy, and I go through with my highlighter. And as I go through it, I'll highlight things that are missing or highlight things that have been added. And then I'll actually like write my notes right on the copy so that when I go back to actually write it, I have all my notes right there. Like all the little things I'm like, this is interesting. Or, oh, that's kind of interesting that they removed that or added that. Or I'll be like, hey, this is the third time they've mentioned this unique thing about the quality rater guidelines that have been added this time. So I think I tweeted once a copy of what one of my note pages looks like from a random quality rater guidelines, and it's like highlighted and stars and and notes written all over it. So that's kind of like part of why I think my posts, why people really enjoy them, because I do kind of go right down into the nitpicky aspects of every little nuance that changes and why it's important.
Correct. And also noticing when something is happening multiple times. Like it's not just, changelog. And it's also annotating the changelog itself. Like, why did they include these things in the changelog? Like, this is interesting.
Yeah. So a lot of it is speculation, like, okay, Google has added this thing in, 5 different spots in the quality rater guidelines. This is telling us that this is somewhere that they're wanting their algorithm to go in the future. So if your site's either doing this or not doing this, this is something that's important to pay attention to. And, maybe it's something you want to focus on for your own sites.
Do you think people listen?
Well, I think sometimes. I mean, it's all, I mean, people like to, there's some people that are like, this is the Bible. And then there's other people like, we don't need Google to tell us what to do. And so there's kind of like two interesting thought processes, I think, of people in the industry of what they take away from them. That said, I know that pretty much everyone will, go over it themselves at least and try to see what's new and changing, because at the end of the day, they want to know what Google's doing for the future, right? Because then you can future-proof your own content.
That's fair. Do you still like doing it?
Yeah, I've always find it fascinating. I just find it really, really interesting to kind of see where the changes are. And there's been a lot of times where I've gone and I've, noticed something that has changed, and usually because mine are so involved, a couple other people will publish it or people will be tweeting about it, and then I'll come out and people are like, whoa, I didn't even notice that part. So that always makes me feel good.
Cool. So if people wanted to read about the QRG and YMYL and EAT from your pen, where could they find you?
They will find it on the sempost.com or just at Genstar on Twitter, where I tweet all kinds of random stuff when you guys release something new and interesting.
Oh yeah, Twitter. That's a thing. Huh.
It is.
Interesting. Cool. Well, Jen, thank you very much for joining us here. I really, really, really hope that we are going to meet again at some conference and we play some Pokemon Go, because that's life. And which one is the next conference?
I will be at PubCon Austin. That'll be my first post-COVID conference.
Ooh, exciting.
So early next year. Yeah.
Wait a minute. I'm going to that too, I think.
Imagine that.
It's highly suspicious.
This is highly suspicious. Okay. Again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Have a wonderful day. On the next episode, we are going to talk about search incidents and search incident reporting. We've been having fun with these podcast episodes. I hope you, the listener, have found them both entertaining and insightful too. Feel free to drop us a note on Twitter at Google Search C, or chat with us at one of the next events we go to if you have any thoughts. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.